Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we are absolutely diving deep into Vermont's legally binding trauma-informed framework for mental health care inside correctional facilities. Because let's be real, if you've ever wondered what actually happens when the rigid, by-the-book rules of the legal system crash headfirst into a fast-moving mental health crisis behind bars, well, you are definitely in the right place.
We've got a lot of ground to cover today. We're going to map out the jail mental health crisis, Vermont's incredibly strict legal timelines, what trauma-informed care actually looks like, how jails connect back to communities, and finally, the real-world hurdles of actually pulling all this off. Let's get into it. Starting off with Section 1, the jail mental health crisis, because this is, without a doubt, a massive public health issue.
First things first, we really have to draw a hard line between jails and prisons because they are not the same thing. Prisons usually house folks with longer sentences, which, creates a somewhat stable population. Jails, on the other hand, they are like a high-pressure revolving door. You've got people awaiting trial or serving super short sentences. In a lot of places, county jails basically function as the largest de facto mental health care facilities in their entire community. And the staff, they might literally only have hours to identify someone in crisis. And people are frequently arriving at these doors already in full-blown crisis. We are talking high rates of depression, anxiety, deeply rooted trauma histories, severe substance withdrawal, and psychosis. Now, take all of that and throw it into the extreme stress and isolation of a jail cell. It is a total pressure cooker. A condition that might be manageable on the outside can deteriorate into a literal life-threatening medical emergency in just a matter of hours.
So how do you manage that? That brings us to Section 2. Vermont's strict legal timelines, essentially a statutory ticking clock. To stop these rapid deteriorations before they spiral, Vermont mandates this highly structured, rapid response from the absolute second someone walks through the door. And to be clear, this is not just a nice suggestion. It is a legally defined framework designed to catch urgent needs before a short stay turns into an absolute disaster. So the clock starts immediately. State law dictates that an initial mental health screening has to happen within the very first 24 hours of admission. No exceptions. If that screening or the person's history or even just their observed behavior suggest any kind of vulnerability, boom, it triggers a mandatory trauma-informed evaluation by a qualified professional. And that clock just keeps ticking. If an inpatient evaluation or actual treatment is deemed clinically necessary, the facility has to provide it within 48 hours of that initial screening. This strict 48-hour rule is a totally aggressive countermeasure against the rapid destabilization that normally plagues those chaotic first couple of days of incarceration.
Which leads us perfectly into Section 3, defining trauma-informed care and the culture shift it requires.
So what does trauma-informed actually mean when you're standing in a cell block? In practice, it means staff are legally expected to recognize a history of severe adversity rather than just ignoring it or brushing it under the rug. They have to understand that a huge portion of incarcerated people have lived through violence, abuse, addiction, or homelessness, and they must actively tailor the facility's response to those really harsh realities. And this creates a fundamental, ground-up shift in the entire facility's culture. Think about it. In a standard jail environment, if there's a behavioral outburst, it's usually just treated purely as misconduct. You break a rule, you get punished. But Vermont's mandate requires the staff to actually pause. It asks them to consider, hey, is this defiance? Or is this actually an underlying mental illness? Is it a trauma reaction? Is this person in a severe psychological crisis? It literally replaces immediate punishment with clinical curiosity.
And the treatment they mandate goes way beyond just a quick check-in and handing out some basic medication. When a mental condition is diagnosed, the state requires a broad, highly individualized treatment plan. We're talking psychotherapy, cognitive behavioral interventions, stress management, designated crisis beds, and comprehensive case management. And the whole shebang has to be explained clearly to the individual.
Now, this framework becomes an actual matter of life and death for individuals facing segregation. Vermont's policy mandates incredibly strict suicide prevention protocols and continuous mental health services for anyone placed in isolation, because there is a very strong clinical recognition now that segregation can dangerously intensify psychiatric symptoms. You can't just lock them away. They have to be continuously assessed.
Moving on to Section 4, connecting jails to communities. What happens when it's time to leave?
The law sets up a complete 4-part statutory pipeline. It takes an individual from that rapid 24-hour screening we talked about right into a thorough evaluation,
down to individualized treatment, and finally, all the way to essential discharge planning. That fourth step, connecting folks back to the community, is absolutely crucial, so people don't just fall off a cliff the second they're released.
I love this point from the source text. It's just a blunt reality check. If treatment stops the literal second someone walks out the jail door, all that rapid stabilization work is instantly lost. Poof, gone. The symptoms will return. Because jail stays are often so incredibly short, continuity of care is not some nice-to-have optional extra. It's a mandatory, statutory requirement of the entire system.
And look, this care doesn't happen in a silo. The law outlines exactly how the correctional and clinical systems have to talk to each other. This includes seamlessly transferring individuals to the Department of Mental Health when their psychiatric needs simply exceed what a secure, typical jail environment can safely handle. But we have to get real for a second in Section 5, the real-world implementation challenges. Because guys, even with the absolute strictest laws on the books, facilities hit massive everyday roadblocks. Actually delivering this care in the real world is incredibly tough. Jails are battling critical workforce shortages and super limited psychiatric coverage. Plus, think about Vermont's rural geography. Transporting inmates miles and miles to outside specialty providers is a total logistical nightmare. You've got budget constraints and security limits constantly at war with really complex clinical needs. So for families and attorneys, it is absolutely crucial to understand that having legal rights on paper does not always equal actual access down in the cell block. I mean, honestly, a simple lack of staff on a random Tuesday night can cause severe delays in care. When a person is in crisis and they aren't getting their mandated care, aggressive documentation, prompt reporting, and strong legal advocacy become the only real tools to force the system's hand. So, we leave you with this. Vermont has built a legally robust, deeply trauma-informed framework that treats inmate mental health as a core responsibility, not just an afterthought. The rules are crystal clear. Screen quickly, evaluate thoroughly, treat individually, and connect back to the community. But with all those staffing shortages and geographic hurdles we just talked about, the ultimate question remains. Can the system actually deliver this vital care when the pressure is on, day in and day out?